FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
It's something that's perplexed me always, that comedy disappeared particularly from the novel, given that the novel originates in comedy. The novel comes about when we move, when somehow or other the world moves from poetry as the way in which from verse as the way in which we express ourselves, into prose. And the great exponents of prose when the novel is born are Cervantes and Rabelais, and one can think of a few Italian writers as well. And the move from verse to prose was a move towards rebellion, really. Verse and tragedy go together, and in tragedy we have the idea that man could be as the gods, and for a moment we see man as the gods, as a god, and then it fails. Man's desire to control the universe, to be a supreme being, we get a glimpse of it, it fails, the play closes, and man is reminded of his small place in the universe again. It's conservative, therefore, a conservative force, I think, tragedy. Comedy comes along as rebellion. When Rabelais and Cervantes start to write novels, it's a rebellion against everything, against the idea of God, against the idea of authority, against the idea of the hero himself. It's derision enters the world in prose and in the novel. It's the derision which it loves our earthliness, it loves our worldliness, it doesn't believe in anything beyond the flesh, our sense of humor, our capacity to laugh, and so on. You will know, those of you that have studied Greek tragedy know that at the end of a day at the Greek theatre, you'd have 3 Greek tragedies, and then you would have the satyr play. And the satyr play was comic and filthy and phallic, and that was how you went home after a day at the Greek theatre. You'd had people putting their eyes out, you'd had people killing their children, and then you got people with huge phalluses making fun of ourselves and celebrating our sexuality. Comedy, filth, sex, those are the 3 great, those are the 3 great things which come together in the novel, and they slowly start to vanish as the novel forgets its comic origins. I'm taking a long time to answer your question.
No, go ahead.
But the novel forgets its origins in the ribald in this way and starts to become sacred. It's probably the people to blame for this are the novelists in England and elsewhere of the late 18th and early 19th century, although, you know, I admire people like Jane Austen and George Eliot immensely. But in George Eliot, for example, the novel becomes religious, and George Eliot is a religious figure. And although Middlemarch is one of the great novels, it's also one of the great non-comic novels. I always complain if a novel isn't comic because I feel it's forgotten what a novel should do, which is all those things I've just described. I can forgive it in George Eliot because she's a genius, but I can't forgive it in novelists who aren't geniuses. Mm-hmm. And little by little by little, the novel starts to become religious and quiet and decorous, and it starts to be about being politically correct, so people will complain that, you know, a novel, oh, I don't like reading him, he's a misogynist, or he's a homophobe, or he's an anti-Semite, as though that's got anything to do with the novel at all. We start to think that the novel should respect something when the novel shouldn't respect anything. So for my money, a novel can be misogynistic, anti-Semitic, homophobic. It doesn't matter if the novel is alive and if the person can write. And probably it actually ought to be all those things.